Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. That morning, Paris seemed asleep, as if the fine, persistent rain was slowing down the city's hustle and bustle. The sky was a stifling gray, almost as if the city itself were covered in a veil of sadness. Passers-by hurried along under their umbrellas. The streets were shrouded in a mist that obscured the outlines of the buildings. But in one corner of Themile du Bois Square, near the Seine, an old man slowly emerges from his sleep. Adrien Marchel is 68 years old, but he looks much older. Age and hardship have left their mark on him. His face is weathered, streaked with deep wrinkles like furrows in exhausted earth. A poorly trimmed gray and shaggy beard partially covers a face marked by years of suffering. A scar crosses his forehead, a vestige of a past he never speaks of. That morning, like every other, he wakes with a heavy sigh. His legs are numb, the pain in his joints is felt with every movement. He can't even remember the last time he slept in a real bed. For nearly 10 years, he has lived on the streets of Paris. The bench, in this square deserted by the promises of modern life, is his domain. He curls up under a threadbare blanket, both refuge and prison. Passers-by ignore him. Cars roar by on the nearby road, oblivious to his presence. Every morning, Adrien wakes up to the same routine, almost like a ritual. He gathers his few belongings, a plastic cup worn by the years, a canvas bag that threatens to rip at any moment. But in a corner of his bag, hidden under a holy sock, there's a medal. A medal he's never shown to anyone. It's his only reminder of who he once was, before everything fell apart.
Dit in another time, another world.
But no one knows that. And he never intended to reveal it. This medal is the only connection he has to a past where he still mattered. That morning, as Adrien prepares to pack up his meager belongings to go in search of breakfast, he hears the sound of dry footsteps. The security guard, a man with a hard face and cold eyes, approaches him. He wears the light gray uniform of a municipal agent, a sterile jumpsuit that blends perfectly with the gloomy atmosphere of the morning. Standing, the officer said, his brutal voice piercing the silence. "I have nowhere to go, sir," Adrien replies, his voice hoarse and tired. "You are violating the municipal decree. Just a little respite, please." Adrien speaks softly, almost as if to convince himself. "You are in violation." The officer doesn't even let him finish. "You'll have to follow me." Adrien stands there, motionless. He doesn't resist. He's seen worse. Much worse. The years have made him a man of silence, a man tired of pointless fighting. He survived war, loss, oblivion.
Why fight another security guard?
He gets up slowly, his body protesting with every movement. He takes a few steps forward, followed by the guard who gives him no respite. 2 days later, in a neighborhood courthouse, morning light streams through the dusty windows of the courtroom.
The place is almost deserted.
The young deputy prosecutor, a man barely older than his 20s, sits at his desk. He leafs through the files, looking distracted. Nothing is on his mind today. He comes across one file among many others. Case 783B. Adrien Marchel, homeless. Reason: illegal installation in a public space. He takes a quick look at the file. Another homeless person, another case of vagrancy.
Nothing remarkable.
Not even anything to note in his reports. Everything happens mechanically. The clerk then enters the room, a distracted look fixed on the young prosecutor. The hearing is scheduled for 10 a.m., room 3. Judge Lambert presides, she adds without much emotion. The prosecutor nods. Indifferent. He puts the file away and stands up, ready to carry out his usual work, a simple administrative formality. The courtroom is nearly empty. A local journalist is there, looking for short stories to report. A few law students are taking their first steps in the legal system. A charity volunteer is waiting, her bag slung over her shoulder, ready to offer her support to those most in need. Adrien enters the room under the watchful eye of 2 police officers, still calm, still dignified despite his wrinkled clothes and worn shoes. His gaze is fixed on a distance he doesn't share. He's never sought recognition, but something about this situation, this cold, impersonal setting, brings back memories he'd rather forget. Judge Lambert, a rigid man but with a certain humanity in his gaze, examines the documents in the case file. He looks up at Adrian, trying to capture his attention. But Adrian, as always, keeps his eyes fixed on the floor, a heavy silence between them.
Mr. Adrien Marchal?
He pronounces the name almost formally, but something in his intonation seems to betray a dawning recognition.
Adrien Marchal. Born in 1957.
Former soldier?
The name hits the room like a flash of lightning.
Murmurs begin to spread among the few people present. The judge frowns, puzzled, but he still doesn't understand. Adrian, for the first time since his arrival, looks up. He seems to have heard his name like a distant bell, but he remains silent. The judge scrutinizes him for a moment, intrigued by the glimmer of memory in his eyes.
Suddenly, a voice breaks the silence.
A woman stands up, dressed in an impeccable military uniform. Her gaze is firm, her body straight, and the voice that follows is full of emotion.
Your Honor.
Adrien Marchal is a legend. She addresses the judge, but her eyes never leave Adrien. He was he who, in Lebanon in 1983, extracted his comrades from a bombed-out building. He disobeyed orders to save lives. I owe mine to him. I was 8 years old. He pulled me from the rubble. A murmur runs through the room. The students exchange confused glances. The police officers appear embarrassed. And in the crowd, a man stands up, then another, then another. All stand respectfully. Veterans, lawyers, a clerk, all whisper in low voices.
Captain Marchal.
The former soldiers look at each other, recognizing the one who, in the heat of battle, risked his life to save them. But for Adrian, it all seems like another world, a world he lost touch with for too long. The judge stood there, silent, watching Adrian, as if trying to comprehend not only the words he had just heard, but also the depth of what he had just revealed. The adjacent room seemed to suffocate with anticipation of what would happen next. This wasn't simply a case of homelessness or flouting a municipal ordinance. This was the story of a man broken by invisible demons, the story of a soldier who had given his life for France, only to have France turn its back on him. The judge closes his eyes for a moment, runs a hand over his face, an expression of confusion and deep disappointment painting his features. He stands up, walks to the door, and after a brief glance at the lawyers and police officers surrounding him, discreetly signals to one of them to follow him. The hearing is suspended. In the adjacent room, Adrian sits on a plastic chair, his eyes fixed on his worn shoes, his face marked by years of hardship. His body, though imposing, seems to shrink under the weight of memories. Every step he has taken in his life, every choice he has made, leads him to this moment. He is not a young man. He is no longer the courageous captain he once was. He is a man who has learned to survive, to hide in the shadows. He is a soldier forgotten by his country, a hero lost in the tumult of time. The judge returns a few minutes later, a grave expression on his face. He closes the door behind him and sits down opposite Adrian. He looks at him, his eyes filled with an unprecedented kindness, a kindness Adrian hasn't experienced in a long time. He asks his question gently, but also with great perplexity. Why did you never ask for help? Why didn't you say anything? Adrian lets out a long, deep sigh. His eyes are empty, as if he's been transported elsewhere, far from the cold walls of the courtroom, far from the present reality. He closes his eyes for a few seconds before answering, his voice hoarse and trembling, almost a whispered confession. Because every time I opened it, I saw myself reliving the war. Those noises, those screams, the smells, the pain. Every day, I wake up with this weight on my heart. So I never wanted to be a burden. It's the last thing I had left, my pride. If I asked, I would lose another bit of myself. The judge bows his head, touched by the depth of his words. He senses the inner struggle of a man who gave so much of himself, but who was unable to rebuild himself afterward. A man who fought for others but, faced with his own suffering, withdrew into a tragic silence. The judge takes a deep breath and leans forward, his voice firmer now, but imbued with an unmistakable humanity.
Mr. Marshall.
You served this country, and it forgot you. You did what many of us would never have the courage to do. But war doesn't end with peace. It continues, here, in the hearts of soldiers. It is not an act of weakness to ask for help. It is an act of survival. You survived, Mr. Marshall. But you will no longer be invisible. Adrian looks up, trying to pierce the judge's gaze, and in a meaningful silence, he slowly nods. He's never hoped for something so great. He's never wanted to be recognized. But here, in this small courtroom, there's finally a break in his world of silence and suffering. When the hearing resumes, the room is full. The soldiers have arrived in uniform, some looking at Adrian with silent respect, others listening to the judge's words with renewed attention. The local camera starts up, its agonizing click echoing in the air, but the atmosphere is different. This isn't just a legal case being tried here. It's the dignity of a man, a veteran forgotten by those he defended, who stands at the center of this room. The judge, straightening his shoulders, turns to the assembly with quiet authority. He takes a moment before speaking, as if to ensure that each word is weighed, that it touches the conscience of those who listen to him. As a judge, I am responsible for enforcing the law. But as a man, I am confronted by my conscience. This conscience that tells me that, sometimes, the law is not enough. He then turns to Adrian and announces with absolute solemnity, Mr. Marshall, I am closing your case. This court apologizes. The Republic has forgotten you. It owes you more than a simple pardon. It owes you recognition, housing, and care. It owes you its memory. The room remains frozen in respectful silence, then applause erupts, first timid, then louder, more sincere. The sound of this applause seems to break the heaviness of the atmosphere, bringing back to life a long-ignored story. A few days later, Adrian receives an official invitation to the Hotel des Invalides, a place steeped in symbolism. There, he finally receives public recognition. Television relays his story, and within hours, thousands of messages arrive. But it's not the media recognition that moves him most. It's the arrival, in this crowd of unfamiliar faces, of his son. After 25 years, they meet again, their eyes filled with tears, and without a word, they embrace.
The pain and the vanished years dissolve in this moment of raw emotion.
Shortly after, a foundation was created in his name, La Mémoire Invisible, dedicated to forgotten veterans, to those who served but whose struggle continues in the shadows. His story becomes a beacon, a source of inspiration for future generations. A year later, a bronze bench was installed in Émile Dubois Park. A simple but dignified plaque was engraved on it. To Adrian Marshall, forgotten captain, who watched over us in silence. Every November 11th, a child in uniform lays a wreath there, not for a grave, but for a living man, a man who has finally been seen. Memory, however silent, finds its echo in the simple and sincere gestures of those who remember.